Alright, today we're going to be talking about the Vatican, and childbirthing, and witches, and DMT. If you think I'm wrong about anything here, I would really love for you to tell me about it in the comments. But let's get started with calendars. The Gregorian calendar, to be precise. You ever wonder why we're all running around with this neat little 12-month system? Seems innocent enough, right? 12 months, a leap year every 4, the works. But guess who made that decision? Yep, your friendly neighborhood Pope Gregory VIII back in 1582. And that's where the fun begins. The church swoops in. Hey guys, we're just fixing the Julian calendar. Too many leap days. Gotta keep Easter in line with the spring equinox, you know. Sure, Pope, sure. But what they were really doing was pulling the rug out from under humanity's cosmic connection. See, the lunar calendar, now that was nature's clock. 29.5 days per lunar cycle, 13 months a year. It's the moon, for crying out loud. The same moon that controls the tides, messes with our sleep, and apparently drives people mad when it's full. The moon is the rhythm of the universe, people, but the Pope didn't like that. Oh no. He's thinking, can't have these people syncing up with the cosmos. They might realize they don't need us anymore. So, enter the Gregorian calendar. A nice clean break from all that messy moon worship, or whatever those heathens were up to. And here's the kicker. With the calendar, the church basically starts disconnecting people from natural time. From the stars, from the moon. You thought you were just late to work? Turns out you're late to the entire cosmic show. But why stop there? Let's rewind a little further. Oh yeah, the good old witch trials. Remember that book, Malleus Maleficarum? The Hammer of Witches? Guess who authorized that piece of work? A pope. The Malleus Maleficarum, the Vatican's witch hunt handbook. Let's talk about the Malleus Maleficarum, the Vatican's very own manual for hunting witches. You know, that 15th century how-to guide on persecuting anyone with a uterus, a broom, or a brain? Now, this wasn't just some random superstition running wild. No, this was orchestrated. It was a finely tuned machine of paranoia and murder, a masterpiece of manipulation. Once you were accused, you were as good as dead. They built the whole thing so that even Houdini couldn't escape it. Think about it. First, they say, well, she's probably a witch. Let's test her. And how do they test you? They drown you. If you float, congratulations, you're a witch. Time to burn you alive. If you drown, you're innocent. Dead, but innocent. Real solid legal system they had going. But it didn't stop there. Every step of the way it was designed to make sure you couldn't win. It wasn't a trial, it was an execution with paperwork. The accusations were absurd, too. Oh, she healed someone with herbs? Must be a witch. Or, hey, she's old and lives alone with a cat. Definitely a witch. But here's the kicker. It wasn't even about witches. It was about control. It was about power. The church, the Vatican, they weren't just terrified of magic. They were terrified of anyone who could challenge their narrative. Women who thought for themselves? Burn 'em. People who questioned authority? Burn 'em. The rules were rigged, man. They didn't want justice. They wanted submission. You were guilty the second they pointed a finger at you. The whole thing was a rigged game of fear. A hellish loop with no way out. It was a state-sponsored slaughterhouse wrapped in the veil of righteousness. And the Vatican? Those guys, they had the gall to call it divine justice. They made the rules, set the traps, and laughed while the bodies piled up. And for what? To keep themselves in power, to keep the narrative on lock. They weren't protecting souls, they were protecting their own asses. Innocent VIII in the late 1400s was like, yeah, this is good, let's start hunting down witches. And who were these witches? Most of them were midwives. You know, women who helped bring life into the world. And get this, midwives became midwives because their grandmothers and their grandmothers and their grandmothers passed down the knowledge. And from what I understand, if that wasn't the case, then they got called into it by having a vision. But that didn't sit well with the church. No, no, no. They saw these women as a threat, as too powerful. Can't have women in touch with nature and healing folks without some religious middleman, can we? So they started burning midwives at the stake. And everyone jumped on board with it. It's fucking sad, dude. Imagine all the generations, all their lineage, all their legacy just wiped off. And all of the spiritual connection that would come with it is gone as well. Oh man, let me tell you, it gets even crazier. So first they kill off these women, the midwives, the herbalists, the healers, all because they were witches, right? Yeah, sure. These women were just too in touch with the natural world, too connected to something beyond what the church could control. You know what the church hates more than a heretic? A woman who knows how to bring life into the world without their stamp of approval. Midwives had this ancient ancestral knowledge passed down through generations. They were delivering babies, healing the sick, and doing it all without the Vatican's permission. So the Church, in all its righteous fury, wipes them out, labeling them witches, saying they're consorting with the devil. But here's the kicker. These so called witches were probably closer to God, or the universe, or whatever you want to call it, than any pope sitting on his golden throne. They were tapping into something real, something natural, and the church couldn't have that. Nah, they needed people dependent on them, on the system they were building. Fast forward a few hundred years, and what do we have? The modern medical system. Oh, the church doesn't burn midwives anymore. No, no. They just helped pave the way for the modern hospital childbirth system, where the first thing they want to do is stick a needle in your back and numb you up. The epidural, right in the spine. Nothing says natural process like being paralyzed from the waist down while you're bringing a new life into the world. And here's the wild part. If you actually let the woman's body do what it was designed to do without all that medical intervention, something amazing happens. You put a woman in a pool of warm water, and not only is the pain lessened, but it often takes less time. The body knows what to do, the muscles work in sync. And get this, when it's natural, the brain releases DMT. Yeah, that's right. During childbirthing processes, the woman's brain releases a similar amount of DMT as when you die, the same stuff that gives people those near death experiences. DMT is produced by your pineal gland, the same gland that gets calcified by the neurotoxin called fluoride, which they claim to put in our water to make all of our teeth stronger. Think about it for a second. You're telling me that childbirth, in its natural, unmedicated state, allows the mother to have a transcendent experience, an actual connection to the universe, a glimpse of the divine. And what do we do instead? We numb it, cut it off, drug the mother, speed it up so it fits into some hospital's schedule. Gotta get that bed cleared for the next one, lady. And who helped lay the groundwork for all this? The Catholic Church. They kill off the midwives, they demonize natural childbirth, and then centuries later they're part of the system that hands over childbirth to pharmaceutical companies, banks, insurance companies, you name it. Now we've got an entire industry built around profiting off of something that should be the most natural, life-affirming process on earth. Oh, and let's not forget, when you give birth in the hospital, they've got 1,000 little ways to up the bill. Want an epidural? That'll cost you. Gotta induce labor? Here's some synthetic hormones for you. Oh, and don't even think about having a water birth in most hospitals. They won't allow it. Why? Because they're not interested in you having a spiritual experience. They want control. They want you to feel dependent on them. And at the end of it, they want a fat paycheck. The DMT part? Forget about it. Most people don't even know that childbirth could be a spiritual transcendent moment. You could be connecting with the universe in a way that's only otherwise experienced in death. But no, let's numb you up, turn this into a medical procedure. Because God forbid you have an experience that might make you realize how powerful your body really is, and how connected you are to the cosmos. And it all ties back to control. The Vatican sets the stage centuries ago by wiping out the knowledge and the people who held it. Then the modern system steps in and finishes the job. Now they've got childbirth locked down, just like they've locked down spirituality, like they've locked down every damn thing they could get their hands on. Anyways, once the witch trials fizzled out, guess who comes back with open arms? Midwives. But of course, you had to get your license from, wait for it, the Vatican. Oh yeah, now they control childbirth. Bring your new life into the world, but first, check with us. See, the Vatican always finds a way to be the gatekeeper, the church. We're not just controlling your soul, we're controlling your babies too. Now, let's talk about some of the other sketchy things they've got their hands in. Money laundering? Check. There are stories out there about the Vatican Bank being a funnel for mafia cash, fraudulent investments, you name it. The Pope's sitting on a throne built from the shady dealings of centuries. Or how about the systematic cover-up of abuse? I mean, how many decades of sweeping that under the rug does it take before we all call it what it is? A full blown criminal conspiracy. And let's not forget about the Crusades. Oh, the good old days when the church decided to liberate the Holy Land. They weren't liberating jack shit. Those were imperialist invasions dressed up as religious duty. The Vatican has always been about control, power, and making sure you feel like they've got the key to your salvation. Just remember how Jesus said to the Pharisees that they will not enter the kingdom of heaven, and that they would prevent anyone who follows them from entering the kingdom of heaven. And they were like, "Yeah, Jesus, now die." Basically, the fuck? Which brings us to this next trend, coexist. Oh, now they're jumping on that bandwagon too. The Pope's on stage with all these other religious leaders, and he's got this big old grin on his face like, "Look at me, I'm uniting the world." But most of us know what's really going on. The Vatican sees this awakening of oneness and spirituality happening, people realizing they don't need the middleman to get God. And the Pope's thinking, "Can't let this get out of hand." So now they're like, "Coexist. We can all be united under one big religious umbrella, just as long as the Pope's still holding it." He gets up there with the Dalai Lama, the rabbis, the imams, the shamans, and he's like, "Yes, we can all coexist now. You have my permission." And we're sitting here like, "Wait a minute, Pope. We were going to do that anyway. We don't need you to tell us we can get along now." And the Pope's like, "Yes, but now you have my blessing." Well, gee, thanks for that. Coexistence? We didn't need your fucking permission, buddy. We were doing just fine without the Vatican's stamp of approval. After all the atrocities that the church is responsible for, this would be like a school shooter holstering his gun and trying to help the paramedics like he wasn't the cause. Except that in that scenario, no one would be watching and saying, "Oh yeah, what a good guy." And yet, here they are, making sure they've still got their hand in the jar, trying to control this cosmic shift like they've controlled everything else for centuries. So yeah, the Vatican. They don't want you to have your spirituality, your awakening, your oneness, and they're still the ones running the show. If there's one thing the church can't stand, it's people realizing that they can figure out the universe without them. They conditioned people to disregard all sources of knowledge outside the Bible, which was manipulated by them. And this includes science itself. And the church tries to evolve to change with the times just enough to still maintain control, without making it obvious to everybody. But I think we're pretty well past the point where they've got any productive moves left to make. There's a massive shift happening in our collective consciousness right now. They always knew it would come, and now it's time for everyone to see the signs. Listen, if you're someone who's worked within the church, understand that I am not condemning you as your system would have you do to me. You would likely call me a heretic for simply disagreeing with something that you know you don't fully understand. Whereas I see the true nature of your mistakes as if I were you. Your driving force may have been to do good, but you've been deceived. I am not angry at you. I'm angry for you. No matter what you think, we are on the same side. You just don't know it yet. Such is the nature of the law of one. Let's talk about control. The people at the top, those guys running the show, they've got a hell of a strategy. They demonize the very tools they're using to control us. Think about it. Astrology, energy work, consciousness. Oh, they'll tell you that's all nonsense, right? Just a bunch of new age stuff, crystals and horoscopes for soccer moms. But behind closed doors, these same people are using that stuff. They're using it to bend reality to their will while they're telling you to stay in your little box of rational thought. Have you ever heard that Rockefeller quote? "Millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do." He wasn't joking, folks. These billionaires are tapping into ancient systems of power while they laugh at you for even considering it. They've demonized it to make sure that you don't explore it. Meanwhile, they're timing their moves with the stars, manipulating energy flows, and harnessing things you're too busy ignoring because they've trained you to think that it's all hokey. It's a classic con. Keep the masses distracted, make them afraid of their own power, and then use that very power to control them. They've got the playbook, and you're not even allowed to look at the cover. So while you're dismissing worldly knowledge as a bunch of bullshit, they're pulling the strings, working with energies that they've convinced you don't even exist. And that's the real trick. They're not just using the system, they're using you to keep it going. Let's talk about the cremation of care for a second. That little ritual some of the world's most powerful men do at Bohemian Grove. Which, ironically enough, where I sit is very close to there. They burn an effigy of care and tell themselves it's all in good fun. But let's cut the crap. It's a symbolic act of stripping feminine power from the collective consciousness. They're not just burning an effigy, they're burning the very idea of empathy, nurturing, and balance. See, care is feminine energy, compassion, connection, creation. But these guys don't want that. No, they're trying to harness pure masculine dominance, unhinged power for control, domination without the leash of care. It's not about balance, it's about supremacy. It's about throwing out the feminine side entirely and saying, we don't need this. They want the aggressive, unchecked, masculine traits: force, conquest, control. And they think that by getting rid of care, they can somehow keep all that in check by themselves. But here's the thing: the masculine is meant to serve the feminine. Care is what keeps that dominating energy from spiraling into pure destruction. Without it, you get chaos dressed up as power. They've got it all backward. They think they're burning away weakness, but they're torching the one thing that holds everything together, the feminine wisdom that tempers that male force. What they should be doing is enforcing feminine care, using the masculine energy to protect it, to build a better world, not just burn one down. So, what's left after that bonfire? A bunch of guys patting each other on the back thinking they're in control. But all they're doing is feeding into a destructive loop of domination without direction, force without focus. They think that they're on top, but really they're just standing on the ashes of the very thing that could save them. Now, let's get into something a little more cosmic: the Law of One. Ever heard of it? Probably not, because the powers that be don't want you to know. These religious orchestrators, the bigwigs in charge of shaping your belief system, they thought they had it all figured out. They thought they understood the game, the rules, the cheat codes. But here's the thing, folks. They missed the biggest rule of all. We're all the same damn thing. Yeah, you heard me, the Law of One. It's the idea that at the deepest level we're all interconnected, part of the same universal energy, the same being. These clowns in charge? They didn't see it. Hell, they didn't want to see it. They divided us up like pieces on a chessboard. This side versus that side, the good versus the bad, the believers versus the heretics. But science, man, science is catching up. Quantum physics is starting to back us up on this. They're finding that everything's connected. Everything's interwoven in ways these religious fat cats couldn't even imagine. But here's the beautiful irony: the yin and yang of existence. These guys thought they were playing chess, but they were really playing checkers on a chessboard they didn't even understand. They thought they could exploit the system, manipulate it, control it. But here's the cosmic joke: they didn't see that every move they made, every act of oppression, every lie they told, was them eating their own damn tail. Because when you hurt someone else, you're hurting yourself. When you manipulate the system, you're the one getting manipulated. They missed the big picture, folks. They didn't see that it's all one giant loop. You can't separate science, religion, or humanity. We're all one thing, and the more you try to divide it, the more you realize you're cutting yourself up into little pieces. They didn't understand the Law of One. They couldn't grasp that every person they oppressed, every mind they controlled, was just another piece of themselves that they were denying. It's like trying to win a game by stabbing your own team. At some point, you're going to run out of players. So here we are, the grand cosmic yin and yang. They can't fight it. They can't manipulate it forever, because eventually we realize and they become the snake eating its own tail. And when that happens, my friends, it's too late for them.